Greetings, Utah Studies, seventh graders, and parents. This is Mr. Kais. I'm here talking about March 23rd through the 27th. Today and through this week, we're going to be talking about creating Salt Lake City. Um, but I want to go over a few procedural matters to help you get through this week's material that'll make it very easy. So here I am on Canvas's homepage. Okay. You'll recognize this. This is the same homepage that you use for Canvas in my class. You see the same thing I see. What we're going to do now is we're going to start working through a tab called modules. It's down here. If you'll follow my screen here, let me get my pen. It's right here on the left side of the course. It's also right here. Okay. So at any point that you want to get in here and make this really easy on you, use modules. Okay. There's probably a faster way to erase this, but I don't really know what that is yet. I'll have to mess around with that. Anyway, here we are. So we're going to use modules. Okay. Click on it here or here. When you go to modules, you'll see the module for this week, which is called Creating Salt Lake City. Now, I want to clarify a few things. The first page in that module says Mr. Kai's Creating Salt Lake City. That's where you can access this video that you are seeing right here. Okay, you can access this video as many times as you want. It'll be in this page. The next page in the Utah or the Creating Salt Lake City module is the textbook that you'll need to use, the part of the textbook you'll need to use to be successful. When you open that up, it will come up into theoretically, it'll come up into the textbook. We'll just click on it. That way it will go a little faster. You'll see the textbook right here. Okay. So when you click on it, you'll see the textbook. We're only going to use pages 125 through 128 this week. And as you click through the slide, show, you will see the textbook. Okay. So you'll have everything you need to be successful in this module you have right there in that textbook. Okay. So that's the second thing. The third thing in this module are the notes. Okay. I'm going to go through a little presentation here in just a moment, but they're the notes. So when you click on that, you will see the presentation that we're going to go through as a class. Okay. And we'll go through that in just a minute. I'm not going to go through it right now, but you'll see that. So you'll have those. You can reference the notes. Then the bottom two. You'll see that they're both called Creating Salt Lake City, but one has a D next to it and one has an A. Okay. Let me explain to you what the D means. The D means discussion. Okay. So the first thing you want to do is go into this discussion. Follow the instructions. It says read pages 125 through 128, which is this textbook right here, and answer this question. What were some of the biggest challenges for pioneers when establishing a new home in Salt Lake City? And you answer that in the reply box below. You'll click on that and just start answering that question and post reply when done. Okay. That's the discussion. That's the first thing you need to do after reading and going through my lecture. That's a discussion. That's what the D stands for. Now, the A, some of you are already coming to the conclusion, the A stands for assignment. Okay. Discussion, assignment. So when you click on the assignment, it'll take you to the assignment for this week. Now, notice I've put the textbook here also, but then you'll see down below, I have the assignment here for you on a Google Doc. Okay. And we will go through the assignment and what I expect of you in the assignment a little bit later in this presentation. Okay. So this is the module. Again, I'm going to repeat how I get there. So we go to the home page and there's modules here in this like little rock formation looking thing or over here on the left. Okay. And so you'll click on that and you can get everything you need to do this week is right there in this module. So you can complete everything right there. All right. Let's talk about creating Salt Lake. Okay. Let's go through this little presentation here. Now, when the Mormon pioneers got to Salt Lake, the big thing was establishing a new home. Obviously, Brigham Young steps into the valley, says this is the place, but now they got to establish a home. They have to build a community. They have to start growing food and find water and all these things that are really important for them. Okay. You can see these in these pictures. They had to start building homes, getting water to come where you want it to go, you have to divert that water. Sometimes you have to dig canals, get that water to come where you want it to go so you can water your crops or whatever you use water for. Okay, that's what those pictures right there show. Now, they entered in the Salt Lake Valley July of 1847, July 24th. We know that. But they had to begin building, a community, and they started building Salt Lake. Now, let's talk about the three most important things to building a community. Number one, they had to find food. Not only did they have to grow crops, but they had to find the local game and decide what they could hunt. As we know, and we've talked about this, the 5 tribes are already there. They're impacting the Utes now, and the Goshutes and the Shoshone, especially up there in that part of where they were at in the northern part. The Navajos don't have really anything with them right yet, but they will later. But when you start dealing with someone else's food, it's like the great toilet paper run of 2020, right? When you start digging in on somebody else's resource, it can get kind of ugly. They had to find water, which this picture shows, and they had to start building homes, which you see right here. They're cutting logs for log cabins. By December, from July to December, they had planted over 2,000 acres of winter wheat, plus potatoes and a few other things. But not everything went smooth, okay? Not everything went smooth. They also hunted game and harvested salt from the Great Salt Lake to be self-sufficient. Let's talk about the crops they planted. We'll talk about that in a minute. So just some fun statistical data for you here. So let's get back on this. 1,540 people, their first winter. So quite a few people, roughly about the size of Monticello is how many people they had come in their first winter. 580 wagons, 124 horses, 9 mules, 2,000 oxen to feed, 887 cows to feed. Now they have grazing, obviously. They could graze on the grass there. 358 sheep, 35 hogs, 716 chickens, which constituted the entire population that first winter. You'll see all that in the book. So they had quite a few people. Now, if you look up here for me, and this where my mouse is, this kind of shows the grid system. And there's a question in your assignment that's going to ask you to talk about the grid system. What was really neat is Brigham Young established a grid system. And you can see like a kind of like the old XY, you have boxes here to establish a community, which made it really easy to divide out the spacing. And if you're ever up in Salt Lake City, it's one of the easier communities to get around because the addresses are set up on a grid system rather than just random areas. So if you ever hear your parents talking and they say, well, I have to go to the mall. It's on 106 South and 3rd West or whatever. That's the grid system, South and West or North and East. Okay. So that was kind of an interesting picture they had in your textbook. All right, let's move on. So the first winter was not as simple as they would have hoped. Many of you have heard the story of the seagulls, but we're going to talk about it. That first winter, in that first spring, they had what we call a plague. They faced a natural disaster where crickets, they come to name them as Mormon crickets, were feeding on their crops. And there was no end in sight. They thought they were going to lose all their crops, and they really thought that they were going to have to continue on to California. Like this area would not be conducive to their living. They would not be able to establish a community there because of these crickets. They were about to abandon, keyword, they were about to abandon the Salt Lake Valley. And then we have the seagulls. The California seagull, which you see in this picture, came in and would feed on the crickets, saving the crops for the pioneers. And to celebrate this heroic act of the seagulls, the Utah State Legislature named the seagull the state bird in 1955. 1955, they gave the seagull finally credit and named it the state bird. And we are going to watch a short 2.5-minute film about these seagulls, okay? But even to this day, the plagues of crickets still threaten crops in the areas of Delta and Tooele, out on that West Desert area. So it's something that necessarily hasn't gone away, but the seagulls do control most of those crickets. And with that, if you'll just go ahead and we're going to watch this 2-minute video on the seagulls.
Why would a state choose a bird with another state's name as its symbolic state bird? Utah's state bird, the California gull, Larus californicus, has good reason to be honored by state's residents. When Brigham Young and the early Mormon pioneers first entered the Salt Lake Valley in July 1847, they found fertile, beautiful land that promised to be their haven. The next spring, after a mild winter, they planted hundreds of acres of wheat and other crops, but in early June, swarms of large black crickets descended on the crops, destroying them. Pioneer records testify to the appearance of flocks of gulls that covered the fields, gorging on the crickets, and thus saving the settlers' crops and ultimately their lives. It is believed those gulls were California gulls, which nest in large colonies on islands, dikes, and along the shores of both the Great Salt Lake and Utah Lake. Ever since that salvation flock in 1848, the California gull has been honored in Utah, but it wasn't until February 14, 1955, that an official state resolution adopted the California gull as Utah's state bird. Ironically, the California gull is not widespread in Utah, but it can be found year-round in the northern part of the state, as far south as Utah County. These gulls are roughly 20 inches long, with a 50 to 55-inch wingspan, and their light gray wings and back contrast with a white head, neck, breast, and abdomen. The wingtips are black, and the eyes are dark. The bill is yellow with black and red markings near the tip, and their legs are a dull yellow. In winter, mature California gulls lose their yellow bill in favor of a gray bill with a black ring, and the back of the head and neck has a gray-brown mottling. California gulls can be found in Utah County around Utah Lake and in rural and suburban fields where they still forage on insects and crickets that brought them their pioneering fame. They are also frequent visitors to parking lots and open fields such as baseball, soccer, and football fields throughout Utah Valley.
Many of you that have been on the up in Salt Lake have probably seen this California seagull, this California gull. Okay. All right. Let's go back to the modules here. So we've gone through the notes for creating Salt Lake City. You can see where you can get the textbook right here, pages 125 through 128. Let's talk about the assignment now quickly. The assignment is called Creating Salt Lake City, and hopefully this Google Doc will open up for me. Oh, it did. Excellent. So what you're going to do, part one, after reading pages 125 through 128, you're going to create 5 questions about the text, questions that you have as you read. You're going to put the page number where you are reading in this box, this far left box. Okay, so if you look at my example, as I was reading on page 128, so I put page 128, I had the question, why did they call the crickets a plague? And then, of course, I'm going to answer that question. Okay, so you're going to come up with 5 questions. There's 5 boxes. Put the page number when you came up with that question. It'll be either 125, 126, 127, 128, the question, and then the answer. Okay, that's part 1. Now, part 2 is now on the second page. 4 questions. What were the 3 most important tasks when they faced, upon entering the valley? What kind of system did Brigham Young use to lay out Salt Lake City? What kind of impact did the crickets have? And why did the state legislature decide to make the California gull the state bird of Utah? Pretty simple questions. Okay, so you have, let's go back to our modules here. For this week, and all this is due on Friday, March 27th. For this week, you're going to look at my video, which I'm creating right now for you. You're going to look at the pages on the textbook 125 through 128. You're going to look at the notes if you need to look at the notes just to do some review. We will be testing on this material, so you want to make sure you look at those notes. You want to complete the discussion and the assignment. Complete the discussion and the assignment. Again, if you have any questions about this, please feel free to email me as quick as you can. I'll email you back as soon as I get it. I'm also here at the school primarily in the morning if you want to stop by. If you don't like the online version of the textbook, if you want to stop by and get a full version of the textbook, a hard copy, I'm more than happy to loan those out at free of charge, of course. Anyway, so here's hoping that all finds you well. Make sure you stay caught up in the reading, and if you have any questions, let me know. be glad to answer them.